Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hi, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am so looking forward to my conversation today with Michael O'Brien. Michael, thank you so much for sharing an hour of your time with us, and please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, thanks for having me first, Jory. I'm totally pumped to be with you because I love your show.
Thank you.
So I feel very honored to be part of your show. So I would say I'll start with my intro. I'm a husband. 25 years.
Oh, congratulations. That deserves recognition right there.
So father of two daughters who are 19 and 21. And then I like to say professionally, I'm the chief shift officer for my company, which is Peloton Coaching, which is not the Peloton bikes, but I do executive coaching and I try to help people prevent a bad moment from turning into a bad day.
I love that. In fact, you know what? I have a little block statue, not a statue, like a piece of wood with a saying on it that says breathe. And it actually says it's just a bad moment. It's not a bad day. So I have that.
Love it. I
stare at that every single day. So clearly I've been channeling your energy and your message.
I love it.
I love what you said, Chief Shift Officer. So tell me more about what that shift means for you and what has that meant both on a personal and professional level?
Well, it's meant a lot of different things. So one, a big shift is just in awareness, you know, and I would say, and we'll probably get into it, but I have something called my last bad day, which is the day I got hit head on by a Ford Explorer when I was out riding my bicycle. I was on a training ride out in New Mexico, company offsite, was going 40 miles an hour. And I remember everything about that morning, Jory. And the thing is, like before that though, I wasn't really living my life with much awareness. I was living it by the script I thought I had to live by, that I thought society wanted me to follow. I was 33 at the time. Both my daughters were very young, 3.5 years old, 7 months old.
Wow.
We've been married 7 years at that point in time.
Wow.
And I thought, you know, you work hard in high school, which I sort of worked hard, but didn't work hard enough. Went to college and worked a little bit harder, but probably didn't work hard enough. And then I thought, hey, you get a gig, you might meet someone, you know, meet a girl, marry a girl, you know, buy a house, raise a family, move up the corporate ladder. And I was really busy chasing happiness. So one shift was stop chasing happiness and just be. Another was shift the script that you're living by from someone else's script to your script.
Yes.
And a lot of it's a shift in perspective that I think we get, especially nowadays with so much going on. We can really put our blinders on and sort of get addicted to being right to our own perspective, how we see the world. Yes. And I think what's critical in helping prevent a bad moment from turning into a bad day is shifting your perspective and try to see some of the goodness in the world, even when you're going through a challenging moment.
Yes. Oh my gosh. There's so much in that I would love to be able just to comment on. First of all, we're so aligned in our vision and view of the world. So I'm really glad to be having this conversation with you. And the first thing I wanted to that it struck me is the fact that you were 33 years old when this accident happened. And do you know the meaning of the number 33?
I actually don't. So, but I'm totally intrigued. So you're going to educate me on this.
I am. And I have a personal story around the number 33. I started seeing the number 33 everywhere when I actually was 33. And it was the point where I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would check the clock and it was at the 33. And probably, 6 or 8 times throughout the day, I would look up and it was at the 33. I never did it consciously, like, oh, it's almost that time. Let me go look at the clock now. I would end up behind cars at the number 33 on their license plate. One of the biggest moments of awareness was I was on a cruise. We got seated at a table for lunch, table number 33 out of 155 tables. It was consistent and it was constant. to the point where I was like, okay, universe, what's the message? What's this mean? And my therapist actually said to me, he goes, well, you know what it means, right? After like 8 months of this happening, he never told me. And I said, no, what does 33 mean? He says, go look it up. And in numerology, every number has a meaning.
Yep.
But there are 3 master numbers, 11, 22, and 33. 33 is the most powerful of the 3 master numbers. 33 was the age that Jesus died and resurrected. So there's a lot of religious, cultural meanings around the number 33, but the translation of the meaning is a higher level of consciousness.
Wow.
And it is a completion of one phase and an initiation into another.
And that's, well, talk about a shift. That's what happened. And so 22 and 11 are the other 2.
The other one. And I always forget what 22 is, but I find a lot of people who are in the awareness path, should I say, see 11 a lot, and like 11. And 11 has to do with being in service.
Well, okay, here's our like, whoa moment. So the date of my accident was July 11th.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
and what I do now
you're
is
in
service
of that awakening shift in awareness.
Yeah.
And so if you decide to, for those of you listening who choose to take the spiritual approach, and like, I'm so spiritual in signs, like last night I just got a new puppy and I was taking the puppy out to go to the bathroom and I set him down and there was a frog sit like right next to me. And I've never seen a frog in my backyard ever. And I've lived here for 7.5 years. And I instantly was like, wow. What does it mean? A frog is about metamorphosis and shift and change. And it's like, of course, I have this shift right now. So like, I'm always looking for that spiritual meaning. So the 33 to me, given what you've taken out of this accident, is no surprise that it was when you were 33 years old. So
yeah, that is so wild. So thank you for that. That's
welcome.
Such a beautiful bit of wisdom now I can take with me. And just because, I call it my last bad day, but it was really one of my best days because it helped me.
Yes,
I'll use the word, wake up call. But the way I use it is it's the shift that it really shifted my perspective in almost every aspect of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about that, but I want to comment on one more thing that I find so fascinating in just what you said in that day, how you remember all the details of that morning before the accident. And I've always found that fascinating, how our brain knows how to recall significant moments before it even knows it's a significant moment. Because that morning wasn't significant until later, right?
Yes.
But yet the brain somehow imprints it as a significant moment, as a core memory. I always find that so fascinating. My father committed suicide when I was 10.
Oh, wow.
And I remember the last phone call I had with him. I remember where I was standing. I remember what I talked to him about. In the moment, there was nothing significant about that phone call. Until after the fact, it became a significant moment. Mm-hmm. And I have that memory imprinted. So I just wanted to share that with you too. Like, did you know at the time that this was, obviously a major accident and injury and recovery and aha moment, but just the fact that you remember all of that is so significant of the significance it has had in your entire life.
Yeah. So without a doubt, like I remember, except for a few minutes where I was knocked unconscious, I remember I can still feel
wow,
like the impact of his truck on me and the sounds I made when I went to his windshield, the screech of his brakes, to the helicopter flight to Albuquerque, every one of those 19 minutes, and landing on top of the roof at the University of New Mexico at Albuquerque's medical center and down into the trauma center and meeting my surgeon. Like, all those memories are so vivid. But waking up that morning, I just thought it was just another morning on the hamster wheel. And then that day changed everything. And I gave that morning that a whole bunch of meaning. And then once I was put under by my anesthesiologist, I don't remember anything for the next 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
But then what's really interesting is when they put me onto the helicopter, and I tried to convince them that the helicopter ride was not a good thing because I was scared of flying back then. I remember making a commitment to myself that if I live, you're going to live life differently. You're going to stop chasing happiness. And no one told me the extent of my injuries, but I broke, besides a whole bunch of everything, the left femur shattered. And when the left femur shattered, it lacerated the femoral artery of my left leg. So in essence, I was bleeding out in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. The doctors told my wife, had I been 10 years older or not healthy, I probably would have died before I got to the hospital.
Wow.
And, that is a little bit of a heavy burden. Like, you lived for a reason. And, early on, I was trying to figure out, like, well, what's the reason? And when I came out of the ICU and the doctors told me about the extent of my injuries, how the driver had a revoked license, he shouldn't have been driving that day, instead of, stopping the pursuit of happiness, I went dark very quickly because they painted a picture, sort of in the spirit that we go where our eyes go, that I was going to have a lifetime of dependency, a lifetime of pain and suffering. And they didn't paint a very rosy picture at all. And I thought, well, if I can't be who I was, even though who I was something I wanted to stop doing.
Right. It's what you knew, though, right? It was it was familiar and known and
comfortable
and safe.
And I was a reasonably successful guy. So I was like, well, if I can't be that as a safety net, if you will, who was I going to be?
Yeah.
So the early phase of my recovery was dark inside. I tried to put on the happy face energetically, but the people who knew me, that's the great thing about energy. Energy doesn't lie.
You can't fake that shit.
So but I struggled in the beginning because.
How long was that phase of struggle for you?
Probably a good, I would say 7-8 weeks until I had a big aha where I knew if I was going to get my body right, if I was going to be the best version, I got out of my own ego and said, hey, if I'm going to be the best father and husband I could be, I had to get my body right. But before I got my body right, I had to get my mind right.
Yeah.
And the whole concept, we can worry ourselves sick, and we do a lot of worrying ourselves sick. Then I was like, well, why? Maybe I can think myself well. But I knew, just as an athlete growing up, that the mind was something that was very powerful. And I really didn't know what to do. I just knew I had to get quiet first before I got better.
Yes. You're saying so much wisdom in this simplicity. I love what you just said around we can worry ourselves sick or we can think ourselves well.
Yeah.
And so simply said, and yet so much easier said than done.
Oh, yeah. And it was
so much easier said than done. And I love that Mark Twain quote that says, all, to paraphrase, all the things I've worried about my life never actually happened.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just the mind's ability to be really creative in the storytelling, and then our negativity bias to draw us into belief of that.
Without a doubt. Like the story, and I had a lot of time to tell a lot of stories because in the hospital, you are in your hospital bed for a long time, and you're surrounded by people. And that was one of the things that was really striking to me during the early phases of my recovery. Was I was surrounded by people, but I also felt very lonely because I didn't know who I was anymore until I made a determination of here's what I'm going to be. And then I got to see all the other people around me. So I saw my wife, who was the head of my Peloton, and I use the cycling term Peloton as a metaphor for tribe or community.
Okay.
But I couldn't see everyone else. And because I was in a funk, I was in a dark place, and I had blinders on. And that's what happens when we get stuck and we get fearful and we get anxious. And I had all that going on until I realized, okay, we're going to start slowly. We're going to take one step. We're going to get quiet first. And then I developed this mantra of okay, we're going to work hard today. We're going to make tomorrow better. So I was going to make little itty bitty steps of progress, micro steps
Yeah.
of progress. And I knew that if I could string some of those together, that even with some bad moments, I could make progress if I strung enough of them together.
Yeah.
And I also made a determination that's, someone told me during my recovery, he said, Michael, all your events in your life are neutral until you label them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, huh? And at first I was like, what are you talking about? It was like some Jedi mind trick stuff. And he said, well, think about it. Like nothing really has meaning until you give it meaning. And from that conversation, it just is. And then I realized, well, I can label this accident any way I want to. What I was doing in the beginning was labeling it as I'm the victim, poor me. And a whole bunch of people validated that because they were trying to be sympathetic. And
they likely also didn't know how to label it in their own mind.
Totally. There's something like
they were picking up on your cue, probably.
Yep, absolutely. And they were well intended, without a doubt. And I realized, I don't have to label this accident as a victim story. I'm going to label it as my last bad day, and I'm going to start pointing my eyes in a different direction towards the things I still had and could do, as opposed to fixating on all the things I had lost because of the trauma. And that was fundamental.
Yeah, it's huge. One of my favorite quotes is energy flows where intent goes.
Oh, I love that. That's I'm gonna steal that one.
Go for it. I didn't make it up, so I don't know who I stole it from, but I've seen it around enough to know it's a quote. Energy flows where intent goes. And if it flows into that pity party or that anger or that spiral into why me, why this, and the victim, then that's where it's going to stay.
Yep.
And is this something that you had somewhere deep inside of you early on that got awoken in you, or was this like an entirely new way of being for you?
Well, what was interesting through my whole experience is that there was a time in the ICU. So I don't remember anything about the ICU. And while I was there, I interviewed my wife for a job. I went through a whole 45-minute interview. I didn't hire her, and she has forgiven me for that. I recommended that we buy Amazon stock. Back then in 2001, Amazon was trading for about $15 a share. She didn't buy any stock.
Oh, you got to let go of that story now, huh?
But I have forgiven her for that. So forgiveness is a big part of my story. But I was repeating this guy's name, David Kolb, and David was the first guy I ever met who was a professional business coach. But he came at it from a completely different angle, with an energetic base, a spiritual base. And I didn't know that was possible because I just thought business was business. And here he came down from Portland, Maine, and he was preaching something completely different. And here I am in the ICU, all strapped down, all drugged up. I have no memory of this whatsoever. And all the people I referenced David. And when my wife told me that, I was like, what are you talking about? And I knew a seed had been planted. I knew he had planted some seeds in me to show me the way. And it was really just a matter of watering and fertilizing and nurturing those seedlings as I started to wake up. And it wasn't this big aha. It was like step by step, day by day, over time. And it wasn't linear. And there were moments where I had, step backs, and then I made progress, and I had to step back and make more progress. And that, I think that was, he's a mentor to me today. He's a friend of mine today, but he was, just instrumental in helping me see that a script that I could write was a possibility.
It is. And the good thing is you're the author of that script.
Yes. And so with that, there's obviously great agency. There is a little bit of pressure, right? Because now you have to be accountable to your own script.
Yes.
And you can't, place blame or point the finger, and you own it. And so for me, though, that, one of the things that came out of it is like, hey, Michael, you're going to have bad moments. We all do. We have challenging moments, sad moments. But those moments don't need to get any more fuel, any more energy than they deserve.
Yeah.
So how can you, roll with the punches, surf the waves, whatever analogy we want to use, so we can stay in our goodness, stay in that energetic zone where we're thinking about how to serve others and make an impact. Because I totally believe this, coming out of my recovery, if you change one life anywhere, you change lives everywhere. There's a ripple effect. The ripple
effect, yes.
That is incredible. And when you think about it, it's just awe-inspiring. And
it's almost too much to contain, to think about, right? The ripple effect. It's like you can't even wrap your brain around what that actually might look or, feel like. That's so beyond you. You touched upon one thing I want to comment on, because it's something I see so much in the work that I do with my clients. And it's the idea of why people stay stuck and why people self-sabotage their successes when they're so close. And I think there's a fear of success.
Oh, bingo.
Right? That fear of success, of people saying, oh shit, if I can do this, then that means I'm going to have to do it again, or I'm going to have to do something more. So if I self-sabotage this, then I can stay in a more self-protected expectation that will be, maybe I can just feel safer in, rather than, having this more pressure or shoulds or, whatever the new story becomes. But it's one of the reasons I see people staying stuck. And I always ask people, how does staying stuck serve you? And they're always like, oh, it's not serving me. I'm unhappy. I'm this, I'm that. This is not serving me. But there's always a secondary benefit of why people are stuck. And I think one of the many reasons is, you already mentioned that whole, who am I outside of this story?
Yeah.
But then there's the accountability of, oh shit, I got to now maintain this.
Yeah. And I think that's a big one. I think it's one. So I love that you just mentioned it, because we often, especially in social media land, we talk about the fear of failure, and then it gets into perfectionism and procrastination and all that jazz, which is all real. But we don't talk about that fear of success. Mm-hmm. And I think it does. I think when I think about all the different entrepreneurs out there that take all the different courses or seminars and stuff, they all sign up with this great enthusiasm, and I've seen it happen, and I've been there. I'm not alone
right.
They're not alone. We're right there with them. But I see this great intent and great energy. I want to sign up for this to get to the next level. And then they just don't step into their opportunity. Mm-hmm. Because I think what you just mentioned, that's the whole fear of success sets in to say, wow, if this works, now I'm at another level. It's new level,
I've got to level up my life.
And I have to make some changes. So in order to say yes to the next level, I might have to say no to something in the past. Mm-hmm. I got to let that go. Yeah. And then what happens is that there's this surge of energy and enthusiasm for the new course or the convention or what have you. And then about 3 weeks later, it starts to peter off. I call it post-traumatic workshop disorder in the corporate world.
I love that. It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. Well, because now we can no longer externalize our resources.
Yes.
Right? Because as long as we're within that, pre-workshop stress disorder.
Yes.
Right? We can say, oh, I need to learn these tools. I need to learn this. I need to learn that. And at some point, we've learned all we need. We just got to do it. Get out of our own way.
Well, that's what I love about, so I'm going to just love on you for a second here, because that's what I love about your podcast and what you've done in stepping into sharing your message with the world, and all the different comments and blurbs that you've been able to get. And it seems like every week the publication that you're quoted in gets a little bit bigger, and there's no fear. You keep on going. In my language, you keep pedaling. And it's, from the East Coast and you're out West, it's so cool to see those Facebook posts of those successes for you. Because you are completely leaning into the goodness that you have and sharing that story and making a difference in people's lives. So it's, congratulations.
And thank you so much for that. And I appreciate what you see. To be seen is a huge honor to me. And it's taken me years to step into that power to say, I'm ready to embrace my potential and to live in integrity of what that means. Because that's, I think, another piece of what people, I see them not, living up to or leveling up or continuing to pedal, as you said, is it's that integrity. At least for me, that integrity of, am I actually living my life within the integrity that I teach?
Yes.
And that fear of being called out was such a motivator for me, afraid that I was going to be on some stage somewhere giving some fabulous talk of, mindfulness and integration of tools to make the change, to get unstuck, to journey forward, blah, 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 right? Great story.
Yep.
But I had a fear of someone standing up and pointing a finger saying, yeah, but you're not doing that.
Yeah.
And, people have that imposter syndrome. And I think it's because how am I actually not living within the frameworks that I'm telling others to do? And so within that, part of my question to you is, so how do you work within your own authenticity when you're having a bad day? And how do you go about the reframe or the not falling back into old patterns that might have been comfortable or familiar to actually stick within your new intentions since that day many years ago?
Well, I think it starts, and I just had, obviously we're recording this, and just yesterday I had a bad moment where I had a little bit of a cycling accident. And for me, what I do allow permission, let's call it permission, bad moments and sad moments and those challenging moments to exist in my life. So in the past, I used to try to control things. Like if I felt if I could control it, I could like win it, right? Win the argument, win the day. And I would have this white knuckle ride of life and career. So current day, I give some space for those bad moments to exist. And then I can take a step out of them, just like what happened yesterday for me, and realize, okay, this is just a moment in time, and I don't have to like give it any more fuel, and be able to shift out of that faster. So as I share with my clients, because a lot of clients will ask, like, do you ever have a bad moment? I go, plenty of bad moments. There are plenty of things that trigger me. The values that I cherish and I honor, if I feel that they're violated, that will get a big old trigger from me.
Yes.
But I now have awareness as to why I'm being triggered, and then acceptance when it happens that I'm human. And then from there, I can decide what action I want to take. And so for me, what I love about what you shared about integrity is like the thing that came up for me is just alignment. Yes. So alignment in what we're sharing, alignment in how we're living, and any person, any vehicle, we'll take a bicycle wheel to play off my cycling metaphor ad nauseum, is that when the bicycle wheel is not in alignment, it doesn't work well. It wobbles and shakes, and it doesn't go as fast as it could. Just like for us as human beings, when we don't have alignment, when we're not in alignment, it's harder to do, the work that we're meant to do. It's harder to make an impact. So for me,
even if it's just to get through our day.
Yeah. And so I accept, those challenging moments, but what I've gotten over time is this ability, or worked on my muscle, if you will, of realizing when I'm in a bad moment and then taking a breath. I'm a big believer in reconnecting with your breath in these moments. So I've gotten better at knowing when I'm getting percolated. So I have something that I call grabbing a PBR, which stands for pause, breathe, and reflect, not the Pabst Blue Ribbon type. And I just spend a moment in quiet. And going back to what I learned coming out of my recovery is that I knew I had to get quiet before I got better. And when I have these moments, I just try to get quiet and think about, okay, Michael, you got a choice now. What do you want to do next? What do you want to say next? And never forgetting I have agency in that, which is really cool and very empowering.
Oh, it's so hugely empowering, and people don't realize just how much agency they have around that whole thing. And everything you just said, like there were the key words that are all the same things. You and I are speaking the same language, which I love. And this stuff just gets me so excited. It gets me, just pumped up to find those people who are so in alignment, and so glad that we're doing this work in service, because so many people need these tools, because it's not taught and it's not inherent. You have to wake up to realizing your choices in whatever's arising. And, you said to have the awareness around it, to understand that you're getting triggered because some value is in violation. That's always going to be the case. It just strengthens what your values are. And go ahead.
Well, and I think, and for me, the particular crowd I like to speak with is that crowd in corporate America who are grinding it out, hamster wheeling it out, if you will, on the 9 to 5, and they don't know any other way. And so here we are, we are coming at our lives with the same type of language, the same type of energy. But the really cool thing is that we're serving different communities, different people. But in each one of those lives, wherever they are, because we all are connected in some form or fashion, we ripple into one another. We cascade into one another. And so I think for a lot of people, they just don't know that there's another way. Or maybe they do. They realize that I know there's another way out there. I just don't know what my first step is.
Yes.
And I try to help them with their first step and, be there in support of them on this journey. Because I know I had to take that first step, and that first step is scary because as we mentioned earlier, we're leaving something behind to step into something new.
Absolutely. One of my favorite stories of my journey was, I was on a retreat with Dan Millman, who is the author of the book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, who's my favorite spiritual teacher. I've been on 3 retreats with him. And I've done this on all of my retreats with him, but the first time, long story short, we had to break a board. And it was right after an exercise that he guided us in self-doubt, demonstrating how self-doubt always gets in our way. And so then he goes on to say, we have to break a board. And the very first thing that popped into my head verbatim was, I can't fucking break a board. And there it was, self-doubt, like instantly.
Yep.
And when he put together, there was 2 cylinder blocks with a board across the top and a purple meditation cushion under the board. And then he said, so what's the goal here? And we were all like, duh, you just told us the goal is to break the board. And he said, no, the goal is to hit the cushion. The board is simply in your way. And there was about 65 people on this retreat, some of which were in their late 70s. And he said, we only got one chance to break the board. And I got up there and it was my turn. And sure enough, I didn't break it. And I said, see, I told myself I couldn't do it. There it was. So we got to get it. There's only 6 of us that didn't break it. I got to do it again. And I shifted my entire focus from the board to the cushion. And I realized how much of my life I was focusing on the board everywhere I went. And when I energetically and visually focused everything from the board to the cushion, I broke through that board. And it was my single most life-defining moment. And I realized nothing's in my way anymore. I can hit the cushion every time if I choose to. And so when I teach this, I use the metaphors of what's your board, what's your cushion.
I love it.
And oftentimes people's board is that they don't know what their cushion is. I don't know where I'm trying to get to. And so because I don't know where I'm trying to get to, I'm now stuck. So it relates back to what you just said of you don't have to necessarily know what you're doing to know you need to do something different. Like that in and of itself is enough.
Yes.
That in and of itself is enough to take the one step of the journey forward, because it's at least momentum or movement or shift. Like you said in the beginning of you're the chief shift officer, right? So it's recognizing, I think, we're coming up against boards constantly thinking, I guess it's not this the universe telling me I'm not supposed to do it. Well, if that's how you choose to interpret that, then yeah, you're going to stay there.
I love that story. And for me, like in a cycling world, if we have obstacles, so think about mountain biking, one of the first things they tell you is like, if you're coming up to a stream that you have to get across, or maybe go up over a bunch of rocks, the thing that the experts will tell you is keep pedaling. Just keep moving. And because a lot of times, a lot of cyclists will give up in their own head before they even get to the obstacle. And what will happen is that they'll start to coast. They don't even realize they're coasting, and then they lose momentum, and then they can't get past the obstacle or over it. And then they come back and say, see, I knew it was too hard. Same story with the board and the cushion.
Same thing.
And so you have to keep, I sign every one of my books, keep pedaling, because I want people to stay in motion. Because if we're moving forward, good things can happen. It doesn't mean that perfect things will happen, but we have the energy of forward movement, which then gives us an opportunity to see things maybe differently. And then we can start to see what we still have and what we still can do. And that changes the conversation that we have with ourselves, which I do a lot of work around conversational intelligence. And I believe that the conversation that we have every day, that's the most important one, is the one that we have with ourselves. And we have to get that right before we can get the conversations that we have with others right.
So I love that. And what would you say if someone who's listening right now has the awareness of, oh man, the conversation with myself is pretty shitty. Like I'm really playing a bad script or repeating a consistently negative story. What would be something you would say within maybe your framework of when you do your coaching might be a really good first step other than the PBR? Yes. Something maybe really tangible, because for some people that feels really esoteric. Like you and I can get that and embody that, but for some, and this isn't a judgment, it's just a fact, right? For some that feels like, okay, I'm thinking about breathing, but it's not doing anything, right? So what would you say might be a good tool for them to grasp onto if someone's listening who needs that assistance right now?
Well, one of the big things I chat with all my clients about is understanding who's in your peloton. So going back to that cycling metaphor, so a peloton is a group of cyclists in a bike race or a bike ride. So think the Tour de France.
Okay.
And although they're on different teams, they all need each other because they're drafting off of one another. They need to collaborate and communicate. They need trust because they're riding inches away from each other. So I'm a big believer in really focusing in on who's in your peloton and making sure, especially current day, that your peloton is diverse and people play different roles. And so when we get in a place where we're stuck or that internal dialogue isn't healthy, I often recommend go to your peloton and help them see, use them to help see the goodness in you. So a lot of times I'll just ask like, hey, can you give me like one of my strengths or give me an adjective that best describes me? And I was just doing this with a client last week, because he was like, I don't even know what my attributes are. And I said, well, go ask your peloton and say, hey, I'm doing something as we close out the year. And I really would love to see and hear from you. What do you see as are my strengths, the things that and only I can bring to the table? And what comes back is this, this sort of great stew of strengths and appreciations that can turn into affirmations if we want to do that. But it gives us now an ability to sort of step outside of our own funk, our own ego, and see what others see in us. And that could be just enough of a shift to start changing that dialogue and keeping those people in our peloton close, because we need them and they need us, because life is not a solo project.
No.
And it's not a one-way street, that we all need each other now more than ever to have a feeling of inclusion and a feeling of belonging, because I think we thirst for that nowadays. We're more connected than ever before because of social media, but we're also feeling so
more
isolated.
Disconnected than ever at the same time. Yeah, it's this weird paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. And so I'm a big believer really understanding like who's in your peloton, and every person in your peloton plays a different role. They don't all play the same role. You might have someone in your life that's really good at challenging you to get you outside your comfort zone, but they may not be there for you like in celebration or if you have a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned this coming out of my recovery. I had some friends that were great at celebrating my victories, but in the moment of greatest need, they weren't there because they didn't know how to show up.
They didn't know how.
And I judged them harshly at first. And then I realized they just didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. And they're still in my Peloton today because they play a certain role.
Yeah.
And I need them to play that role. And they may not be equipped yet to play every role, but that's okay.
That's okay.
I welcome them in.
And I imagine some people are listening to this, and I'm even thinking in myself of, okay, there's people in my Peloton that I don't really feel serve me, but they're kind of just fixed roles. And,
Yes.
you know, how do I get people out of my Peloton that won't leave and they're just there? So I would, you know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud of this reminder I often have of be grateful for the difficult people in your life because they remind you who you don't want to be. So sometimes it's a backhanded, you know, awareness of you don't think you're being served by someone, and yet everyone is a lesson to us. Everyone is a mirror in some capacity of, you know, often where our biggest resistances is something maybe we most need to work on.
I love that. One of my coaches told me that way back when I was dealing with a person that I would label back in the day as toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I worked on trying to let go of that label and just accepting that person for what they were at that moment in time. And it helped me, help me see that person in a different light. It also helped me see a little bit of the goodness in that person, which was so difficult in the moment because I was so charged.
Yeah.
And it just allowed the door to open just a crack. Now, I'm not going to, say that we became best friends forever, but the relationship got slightly better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's improvement, right? So
It's huge.
never
Yeah.
like it, so I felt some accomplishment. We felt a greater connection, but yeah, some people show up in our lives for many reasons.
Absolutely.
And it's only for us to decide, like, how, why is this person showing up? What's the message with this person? And what can I learn from the person that's right next to me or right in front of me?
Yeah. One of the things I do is teach loving kindness meditation.
Oh, yeah.
And, that metta practice is so powerful. And when I guide people in a loving kindness meditation, I do it in 3 different ways of, imagining in your mind's eye someone who you love very much. And, when you have this meditation practice, that you imagine this person receiving this, loving kindness you're extending. And then I'll have them imagine themselves. And it's often harder to give that loving kindness towards ourselves as it is to someone we care very much about. And then I'll have them do loving kindness for the most difficult person in their life. And that's a big old fat struggle. And that's where the work is, right? Because it's the energy we're holding on to that challenge or resistance that often prevents us from moving forward. And it's powerful to even see where we don't even recognize the power some of that negativity has in holding us back.
Oh, without a doubt. And, current day, I have someone in my life within family. Sometimes family is the biggest charge.
Oftentimes, because they're the ones who are still in your Peloton.
you bet. And so, and I also I'm a practitioner of loving kindness meditation too. And in those moments where I have to project love towards them, those are some of my more challenging moments throughout the day.
Yeah.
But through my recovery, I'm committed of staying in it and doing the work. And I can be grateful. That's one of the things that I really learned coming out of my recovery is just the whole practice and the power of gratitude.
That's
that
huge.
I can be grateful for my struggle. I can be grateful for the challenges because I know once I get through them, they become my greatest learning opportunities, my greatest source of strength.
Yeah.
And so I've really tried over the years, it wasn't right off the rip, but over the years, really trying to embrace that concept. And
that's why it's a practice, right?
You bet. There's some days that are really good and some days that are a little bit,
we're still in practice.
Yeah, still in practice. Absolutely.
One of my first retreats I went on was with John Kabat-Zinn, who's like the grandfather of mindfulness in modern time. And he had said something that really always stuck with me, which is, as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you.
Yeah, I love that.
And, so what better reminder, especially I have this, this visual of you that day, your last bad day, and you were breathing and there was more right with you than wrong with you. And you made that amazing choice to, as I would say, journey forward. And for you, would say, continue to pedal and live in a more aligned and aware and awake and conscious manner. And to me, there's no other choice. And yet it is a choice daily, moment to moment.
Moment to moment. It's an intention that I start it's a morning practice of, I wake up and I have become very intentional about how I'm showing up in the world. And before I do anything, I grab my water, I have my water, and then I set my intentions about how, because it's a daily practice. And even when I set my intentions in the morning, sometimes there's a curveball by mid-afternoon, and that's a chance to reset and demonstrate some resilience. And when we're resilient,
and remind yourself you're human after all.
And I think those are great conversations to say, hey, you know what? I'm aware, I accept that I'm human, and now I can shift.
Yes.
And the more we do that, the better the conversation with ourselves sounds.
Yeah.
And it's just like any muscle. It gets stronger and stronger and stronger.
It does.
And it gets easier, although it never gets easy.
Yeah. Michael, these kind of conversations just fire up my soul. I could talk to you for hours, and I to find people in alignment where I get to speak the same language is just, it's really a gift and an honor to connect. And so tell people, how can they find you? And I know we'll have all these links in show notes, but you've got a book, and how can they, if they wanted to work with you or just follow you, what would be the way that would be best to find you?
Well, thanks for asking, and thanks for having me on. I'm really honored. I remember the first moment we met was in line going into Unfair Advantage Live, and I was like, oh, this is a special person. So
thank you.
So I'm ever so grateful that you had me on the show. The best way for people to get in contact with me is michaelobrienshift.com. And there they can check out my books. I have one memoir about my last bad day, and my new one, which is free, a free book plus shipping and handling, is all focused on preventing bad moments from turning into bad days. And it's called My Last Bad Day Shift. It's more about all things I did along the way. So all time tested, and in my corporate life and in my personal life.
I love it. And I know you had a small setback yesterday, so thank you for continuing to take care of yourself in the best way you know how, and for being here today.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me. So I was not going to miss this. So one branch to the face riding my bike was not going to stop me from sitting down with you tonight. So
well, good. And my new puppy is not going to prevent me from, continuing. It's all about how do we get resilient and shift around our needs and our expectations to continue to show up, right?
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I'm so grateful for your story. And I am so happy to have shared with you the insight about being 33. I hope you continue to take that to its truest form.
Yes.
Because that was definitely no accident. So,
yep.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And we'll catch you next time.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.